Mindsetters. Welcome to Mindset Learn Extra, where you learn more, learn extra. You're tuned in this hour with myself, Tebogo Precious, and the lovely Miss Tanya. How are you doing?
I'm fine, and you, Tebogo?
I'm fantastic. Now, we'll be handling business studies today. Would you kindly let us know what topic we'll be dealing with?
So today we're going to be looking at ethics and professionalism, and it's going to be a
Okay.
mixture. There's a very fine line, so it's going to be interesting going between the two of
Yeah, I
them.
can imagine ethics. And, mindsetters, don't forget, you know the drill by now. Facebook.com/learn extra, mindset learn/live. That is where you post all your questions, all your queries, your comments, you interact with us. Tanya, I'm going to let you go prepare for a while.
Okay.
While I still remind them a little bit
What's-
about what they need to do.
Awesome. Okay, see you guys now.
Okay, so you guys are pretty clued up on that. Facebook.com/learn extra, mindset learn/live is where you need to be at right now. Tanya, you ready?
Yes.
Cool. Take it away, please.
Awesome. So, grade 12s, like I said, today we're going to be looking at ethics and professionalism. Now, there's a very fine line between the two of them. And if you think back to all the life orientation you've done, you should have done some stuff on morals and values, things like that. And what we're going to be looking at today is specifically taking what ethics are, which is doing right and wrong, and we're looking at right and wrong, and applying it to business. Now, you can imagine issues like being moral and ethics and professionalism is very important in business, and it will affect their sustainability as well as just their general business practices. So let's have a look. The first thing we're going to do is look at what business ethics involves. So what does it mean to be ethical in the business sort of setting? So the first thing, would be, so it is fair practice with employees and customers. So what that means, not only are you supposed to be ethical with your employees, you need to be ethical with your customers. So if you are planning on selling them goods, and if it's second-hand goods, for example, you need to let them know that this is second-hand, because that's treating them in the correct manner. And your employees, that would be things like making sure that you pay them on time, that you pay them correct amount, minimum wage issues, things like that. The next part to business ethics would be corporate social responsibility. Now, corporate social responsibility, remember, would involve looking after the community, looking after animals, as well as just looking after the environment. So remember, CSI or CSR. The next part to this, issues regarding the rights and duties of a company and its shareholders. So remember, shareholders, we've looked at companies, things like that. So what is the business's responsibility or ethical behavior towards people who literally have a stake in the business? Another part would be issues concerning relations between different companies. So you could, for example, be two different companies selling the same product, let's say cell phone companies. So what are your ethics when you look at a company that is selling the same product? In other words, competition, for example. So are you going to, so an unethical thing, for example, would be to get somebody to get information from their company. So sort of like corporate espionage, things like that. That would obviously be a good example of not being ethical between two companies. Another part would be leadership issues, example, corporate governance. And the last one I have here, political contributions made by business enterprises. And this statement basically is just trying to get the message across. If your company is affiliated to politics in any way, how much money you're spending on it, and what political influences does it have. And that does become that becomes an ethical issue. And what I want to bring in with all of this together, there's a very fine line, like I said, between ethics and professionalism. And we're going to go into a little bit more detail now. So let's go to the next slide. So, like I said, what are we going to be looking at now? What is the relationship between ethics and professionalism? And before we can do that, really, let's quickly I want to give you guys a definition so that you know exactly what it means when I say ethics. So, ethics refers to a set of values that are morally acceptable in society, which defines right, good, and fair actions. So ethics literally looks at what is right and good, and also, which I didn't add in there, which is, so what is right and good, and whether you're actually going to act on it? So are you going to do the right thing? So keep that in mind. So what we looked at now was ethics in general. What I want you to focus on, and this is very important obviously because we're doing business, what are business ethics? Now, business ethics refers to rules and principles which influence best business practice. So businesses develop their own code of ethics for best practice. Now, a lot of the time, companies will have their own, and a lot of you this should ring a bell, would be a code of conduct. Now, a code of conduct and a code of ethics will go together. Now, this would be important because, as we'll look at it a little bit later, you'll also see different professions have their own code of ethics. So doctors, for example, will have rules that they live by over and above the rules of the country, for example. Teachers have their own rules and regulations that they have to abide by ethically over and above laws. Now, the last part when we look at ethics would be that ethical conduct is a prerequisite for being called a professional. Now, being ethical is a prerequisite for being professional. In other words, you cannot be professional if you're not ethic. So do you see how the link is starting to come together? So you cannot be professional if you're not ethical. And also you can't be ethical if you don't follow laws of the country, for example. So all of these come together. And I'd like to throw in, thinking about a third or fourth lesson we had on legislation. So if you own a company and there are labor laws, any law really, if you don't follow the law, you're not being professional. If you're not being professional, if you're not following the law, you're not ethical. If you're not ethical, you can't be professional. And this will all, obviously, in the end, influence your business. So that's being ethical. That wraps up for now what is ethical. What we're going to be looking at now is professional. So professional is a set of standards of expected practices. Example, treating people with respect within your company. It's also specific occupational practices have developed their own codes of professionalism. And like I said earlier, different professions have different codes of conduct, different ways of being professional. Now, these things are important because different occupations will obviously have different demands. So you can imagine the demand of being a doctor compared to being a teacher, for example. There are different ethical issues being pushed on you constantly. And if you're a teacher, whether you're a teacher or a doctor, you're working within an environment, be it formal business or something like that. Now, your behavior will, in the long run, affect the business you're working for. Now, let's carry on. Now, being professional means, so what does it mean to be professional? So it would be demonstrating appropriate behavior towards colleagues, supervisors, subordinates, and the public at large. So if you want to be professional, you should be professional throughout. So it should be with your co-workers, with your boss, and even clients. So there should be a set standard of behavior. What else does it mean to be professional? It would be avoiding the pursuing of personal agendas at the company's expense. An example of that would be you want to become a manager within the next 3 years. Now, for you to get to become a manager, you would have to do certain things. Now, when your personal goals get in the way of your company's goals, that's when it becomes a professional issue. So in theory, what they're saying here, your personal goals should be slightly aside to the company's goals in the long run for you to be deemed as professional. Another way to look at being professional would be representing your employer, co-workers, and yourself with dignity, very important. Another aspect, setting standards for expected practices. Example, treat people with respect. Can you see how there's a whole line forming here? Or the whole same idea. And another one here, career practices that are developed. Example, professional dress. Now, professional dress is very important in the business world. If you're a business person, or different careers really, when you walk into an office and you look at the way somebody is dressed, it immediately creates an impression. Now, we've looked at reading body language and how body language influences people. So body language, remember, would be a subtle way of getting a message across. Professional dress is a very important thing. Think about if you go to a doctor and you arrive there and he's wearing slops, some shorts, torn t-shirt. You're going to walk in there and you're going to go, I don't know. And that is literally just because the way he's dressed. So professionalism and dress go hand in hand. Now, let's carry on. Appropriate behavior towards persons and positions of authority, co-workers, and the public. We've mentioned that. And it would also be another, what it means to be professional, that it's unprofessional to make promises and they are not adhered to. In other words, if you're in the business world and you promise to deliver so let's say your company creates different adverts and you told the company that you're doing the advert for, that you will have it done on the 20th of June. 20th of June comes, the company expects you to have their work ready for them, and you go, I'm so sorry, no, we didn't get to it. That is unprofessional, and possibly, if we go into a little bit more, it's not ethical, because now you've let another company down, and that will put their business behind. So it's keeping, it's making and keeping promises is also it's a professional issue. The last part to this, most professionals have developed their own professional code, example, medical profession. And at times this code is stricter than the law. So literally, I'm just going off the bat here, but if you can become a doctor, you put down an oath. And like I said, you have your own code of being professional. Now, these codes, even though they might not be a law of the country, for example, but they are rules you need to adhere to as a doctor, for example, to be seen as a professional and eventually also in the long run, ethical. So I hope you guys are starting to get the difference between ethics and professionalism. So let's jump to the next slide. So as I said before, remember there's a relationship between ethics and professionalism. This slide, I'm quickly going to sort of just touch on the King's Code again. Remember, we did King's Code right in the beginning of the year when we looked at issues of planet, people, and animals. So that was that part. Remember, that also goes with looking at the JC, for example. You need to follow codes of best practice, things like that, and all of those things tie into the King's Code. So let's have a look. So the Code of Best Practices for Corporate Governance, the King's Code. Now you get King's Code 1, 2, and there's even a King's Code 3 now. So it depends on your teacher, which one they want to share with you. But really, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter which version you have, as long as you have the core idea of what the King's Code is about. So first part here, corporate governance refers to the way in which a company is governed. In other words, the way it is run. Now, it also explains the relationship between the company, its stakeholders, between the company and its stakeholders. In other words, their shareholders, customers, directors, etc. So literally, the King's Code and the corporate governance looks at the relationship between business, the people who work for them, as well as their clients. Another point here, Judge Mervyn King developed a code of best practice of corporate governance. Now, this code focuses on, this is very important, grade 12s. If you don't have this, make sure you've got this somewhere. So this code focuses on, firstly, transparency, secondly, responsibility, third, accountability, fourth, fairness, fifth, sustainable development, leadership is 6, and lastly, values. So there are 7. There are 7 parts to good governance that companies should follow. And if they adhere to this, or they at least aspire to go towards this, it will place their company in a position of being professional and ethical. Now, these issues, which I've just discussed here, these issues reflect professionalism within the business. Now, business enterprises should act as responsible corporate citizens. In other words, businesses essentially must act as ethical and professional beings. They're providing services, it involves money, and it creates a whole issue around exploitation, things like that, which we'll touch on a little bit later. But business must be ethical, really, at the end of the day. Now, this part here, ethical, responsible, and effective business practices include. So if you want to be a business that is ethical, all those things, now you know what you need to follow, but now we're looking at we're going to look at what it actually involves. So the first part, or the first thing this involves, is not starting a venture at the expense of someone else. This point literally means you don't start a business or you don't start something new if it is going to be at the expense of another. In other words, if it's going to harm another person financially, in a non-competitive way. Obviously, businesses are cutthroat, and we all need to get into the market in different ways. But if it's going to hurt an entire community, if it's going to hurt an entire ecosystem, that is not ethical. So rather think of it, go with that rather. Hurting entire communities, the environment, things like that. Another way for business to be responsible would be taking care of the environment and society, like I just said. It would also be paying employees fair remuneration. In other words, for your company to follow this, you need to pay your workers according to legislation. So minimum wage, looking at how many hours are they working, are they getting medical aid, are they getting pension, are you treating your employees fairly? The last part, second last part, treating all your employees equally. Now, the nice thing with this is legislation has covered that, at least theoretically, where you're not allowed to discriminate on the basis of race, gender, age, sexual orientation, all those things. So the laws are in place, but literally you as a company need to make sure that you are treating everybody equally. And treating everybody equally would also mean paying people fairly. Remember in the past, men got paid more than women, for example, and that would obviously not be ethical now anymore. And the last part would be making sure that you're paying taxes to SARS. Now, some companies that are not ethical, for example, take cash, doesn't go through their books, SARS doesn't get it. But I'm going to go into SARS in a little bit more detail a little bit later. Should we go for a break?
Yes, please. Well, thank you, Macmillan, for sponsoring this fruitful show. If you feel you've missed anything throughout the first segment of the show, feel free to just look for the show on YouTube and the notes on Facebook. They will be available, and we'll see you after the break. Welcome back, Mindsetters. All eyes and ears glued to channel 319. Pay special attention to the lesson, and I promise you it's going to be rewarding. Do not forget to post all your questions, all your queries, and your comments about the show on facebook.com/learnextra or on mindsetlearn/live. Are you ready?
Yes.
You may have to.
Okay, now remember, before we went to the break, we quickly had a little bit of a revision on the King's Code. And I just want to tell you guys again, don't stress whether you've got the first, second, or third edition of it. It all really comes down to you making sure that you know what those 7 parts are, as well as just remembering it's about social responsibility. It's linked to companies being listed. There's a whole lot to it. So if you don't have these notes, please go on the website, get them, get these notes, previous ones I've done on the King's Code, and just make sure that you know what it's about, especially for your prelims and your finals. Now, what I want to look at this section is looking at what are unfair business practices. And there's about 4 of them, and we're going to go into quite a bit of detail. So let's look at the first one. So issues perceived as being unethical and unprofessional in business. I'm going to change color. Let's make it a bit more interesting. So the first issue is tax evasion. Now, this point, before I get into tax evasion, I just want to explain to you the difference between tax evasion and tax evasion and tax avoidance. Big thing. Let me actually write this down for you so that you can remember this, because this actually does get asked. So what's the difference? For example, let me just go to the bottom of the page. So tax avoidance is actually legal. So tax avoidance, it is legal, and it can be done through things like donations throughout the year, and other ways of reducing your expenses or your tax. Now, I want to explain this. Yeah, let's explain this in detail. Now, we've just done accounting, right? So we know companies donate money, things like that. When you donate money and other activities, it becomes tax deductible, for example. And not just donations, but so think about all the things companies can do to literally and legally save money on paying tax. So tax avoidance is legal. Okay, you're allowed to do this. When you donate money, at the long run, you're going to pay less tax, things like that, so you're saving money for the business. Where on the other hand, tax evasion, it's illegal. They will lock you up.
Get prosecuted for that.
Exactly. So remember, tax avoidance, it's legal. It's companies do it to save themselves money. Let's quickly jump back up to tax evasion. So tax evasion looks at not purposefully not paying money towards the government. And remember, why does the government need money? To build roads, schools, to improve the infrastructure of the country as a whole. So this is very important. So that's what the first point about. The government needs revenue from taxation to provide essential services like housing, education, and medical services. So all personal income tax, business tax, all of those things go towards, remember the national budget that was released earlier this year? They take all of the money received, and that money gets broken down and given out to improve South Africa as a whole. If you don't pay tax, you're not helping, literally. So that's very important. Now with tax evasion, corporate tax and personal tax, like I said, are the main sources of income for the government. Now, maybe businesses and individuals do not declare all their income to SARS. Many companies don't. Now, what does this mean? Now, this is not only unethical, but it is also illegal. Now, this is a crime and punishable by law. So, people need to pay tax. Individuals, businesses need to pay tax. Like I said, money goes towards improving the country. So, tax evasion, illegal, punishable by law, they will lock you up. Tax avoidance, legal ways of paying less tax. And obviously, if it's legal, they're not going to lock you up. Now, what are solutions to the problem of tax evasion? Let's look at the first solution, or first improvement. Now, professional behavior in this regard would obviously be to pay your tax when it's due. Whatever, you will get the information from SARS, how much you need to pay, and you pay it. The problem with tax evasion, remember, would be people receive cash, they don't put it through their books, and this money will obviously then not be taxed, for example. So you need to put all your money through your books to make sure that you are accountable for all of it. Another way to improve this, government can work towards reducing taxes so as to encourage more businesses and individuals to pay their taxes. Literally, grade 12s, if every South African pays the tax they're supposed to be paying, we would all be paying less tax, literally. So if your business isn't paying tax, it's taking away, and it's actually just making the whole issue worse. So that's one thing you can do, make sure that you pay it. And government can also educate all on the concerns and the importance of paying taxes. And lastly, they should also utilize taxes for the correct purposes so that people would see how the money is used and would, therefore, want to contribute. So, first issue with business practice or unethical or unprofessional business practice would be tax evasion. Now for grade 12, you need to know what the problem is, tax evasion, and you also need to be able to give solutions. And just one of the solutions to remember, educate people, okay? And not just educate, just do the right thing. Another issue we have is, I should see which one I've got here, sexual harassment in the workplace. Now sexual harassment is most definitely unethical and unprofessional. And now, before we go into how we can fix this, let's just look at what sexual harassment is. Now, we look at sexual harassment in this section, but sexual harassment is actually quite a big thing in the business, in grade 12 business, and that it also becomes part of legislation. And just make sure that when you sitting at home right now can draw the link between legislation and a lot of these ethical issues we're looking at now. So what is sexual harassment, grade 12s? Sexual harassment involves the unwelcome or unwanted attention of a sexual nature from someone at work that causes discomfort, humiliation, offense, distress, and interferes with their job. And I should do the second point with you here. It is immoral, wrong, and unethical to abuse your position to take advantage of another person. So sexual harassment in the business world could be male to female, female to male. Really, it could be in any form. And sexual harassment, literally, grade 12, comes down to unwanted sexual attention from another person. And you think about this, when you're having a bad day or you're feeling uncomfortable or you feel like a teacher was picking on you, you spend the rest of the day just not feeling, you just don't feel cool. Now imagine your boss is like just being creepy. You're not going to be able to work very well, right? And not just the fact that you're not going to be working very well, it is violating your basic human right to safety. Okay, so let's carry on. So what does sexual harassment include? It includes unwelcome sexual advances, gestures, remarks of a sexual nature, touching a person in an inappropriate sexual manner, and this is an important name that has popped up in the past in papers, guys. It's called quid pro quo sexual harassment. Now, quid pro quo sexual harassment, Latin, it's a Latin thing, and it literally means something for something. Now, this type of sexual harassment would be when a person in a senior position approaches a junior or a subordinate and says, if you do certain sexual favors for me, I will give you a promotion or I will give you a raise. And that's where the quid pro quo comes from, something for something. So it's important to remember that term. And another thing, what it also includes, pressure for sexual favors to clinch sales deals, etc. Now that we know what sexual harassment is and what it involves, obviously we need to look at ways to fix this issue. So the first solution to this would be employers should be proactive and prevent the problem rather than having to address it after the damage has been done. In other words, as a company, you need to make employees very aware that what is sexual harassment, that it's illegal, and that there would probably be policies dealing with people who literally break the law here. So a business has the responsibility to make employees aware of this issue. Another way of doing this, they should have a clear policy regarding sexual harassment, so literally a policy stating what the company's position is on it. And like I said, they need to educate employees. And lastly, work in a positive corporate culture in which the rights and dignity of all staff members are respected. So what they're saying with this last point here is that you should create a business with a culture of respect. And with respect, obviously, things like professionalism will go with it. Now, there's a third issue, or there's actually four of these. So let's have a look at the third one. So that was sexual harassment. The next one, we're looking at pricing of goods in rural areas. Now, the problem, so I'm going to just chat you through the issue of pricing, and then we'll go through the solutions on the board together.
Okay.
So now, the pricing of goods in rural areas, what happens often is, if you think about a rural area, it's a small community, there's probably one shop, and everybody is literally forced to go to that one shop. Now, what happens is that little shop owner probably goes to buy his goods from a wholesaler, so it's already a little bit more expensive to start with. Now, because this person is the only shopkeeper in, let's say, 20 kilometers, people are all going to end up going to him or her. Now, what could happen is this person, if they're not ethical, they're going to go, you don't have a choice. I can charge you 20, let's make it ridiculous. I can charge you 40 Rand for 2 liters of milk. Now, we all, like, I'd be afraid of a lot of you at home, you know how much milk costs, but 40 Rand for 2 liters of milk is a lot of money. Now, why is this unethical? Because people don't necessarily have transport to go that far, And people, if it's in a rural area, a lot of people are unemployed or are unskilled laborers, so they don't have a lot of money to start with. Now, if you're a shopkeeper who's unethical, you're literally forcing those poor people to buy your expensive products. So you can see why that's definitely an issue.
Yes.
Now, what are the solutions to this problem? You can get all these notes on the website, guys, so don't stress. Everything I've said, it's over here, and you can grab these notes there. Now, let's look at the suggestions about the issue of pricing. Now, rural traders should be encouraged to be more ethical in their dealings. They should determine fair, market-related prices for their products. What is market-related? So market-related would be, what is the average price, for example, of 2-liter milk? You're going to laugh at me, but I'm not entirely sure how much it is either. I think it's around 18 bucks, 20 bucks maybe. So let's go on that. Let's say the market price is around 20 Rand. So if you're a shopkeeper in a rural area, you should make sure that you are in line with the 20 Rand. It could maybe be a slightly more expensive, let's say 22 Rand, but that is not exploiting the people in the area. And the last solution here would be keeping prices low, that they would benefit the business. So keeping prices low would benefit the business in the long run. What do I mean with that? If you continuously overprice your products, people will eventually find a way to get that same product at a cheaper price. So that might mean going once a month really, really far, spending a bit of money on transport, but then instead of buying milk from you, I'll go to a big shop, buy a lot of milk and keep that with me, like a long life milk kind of thing. So your business in the long run will actually lose. I quickly want to look at the last point here. The last issue that's seen as unethical and unprofessional would be unfair advertising. Now, I love advertising. It's a lot of fun. It's very interesting. But advertising can also be unethical in that you can have people creating adverts that are unrealistic. Perhaps the product doesn't meet up with the actual product. And issues like that will obviously be unethical. So let's have a quick look. I want to jump down to unethical advertising. Would include giving goods deceptive names. So like Wonder Skinny. Now, if I read that, I think, oh, this product will immediately make me lose a whole lot of weight. That's not ethical. What are the chances, literally, grade 12s, of taking a tablet tonight and waking up 20 kilos lighter? It's impossible. So that's deceptive naming. Another issue would be using false or deceptive advertising, selling second-hand goods as new goods. Would also be criticizing competitors' goods. So saying, I own company A, my products are much better than company B's. That's not ethical. And let's do one last one, using small print in the advert to mislead the consumer. And small print, in other words, terms and conditions apply, and when you actually read the terms and conditions and you realize, oh my word, they actually said you might lose 20 Ks, but it's not guaranteed, kind of thing. I want to do the suggestions after the break, so I'm quickly going to give it over to you.
Okay, it is now time for a quick break. I'm just quickly going to read one post from one of our Mindsetters. Rofua says, thanks to Mindset, I'm really enjoying business studies. Now guys, I'm anxiously waiting and I'm looking forward to checking out your posts on Facebook. If you're trying to post and you haven't yet posted and you're wondering what the address is, it's facebook.com/learnextra or mindsetlearn/live. We'll see you after the break. Welcome back, grade 12s. Yes, we are busy with business studies and unethical issues and, professionalism. If you feel you've missed something, do not forget we are available on YouTube and Facebook. You will get your notes from Facebook, and you can post your questions, your comments on www.facebook.com/learnextra or mindsetlearn/live. Now I'm quickly going to hand it over to Tanya. I'm sorry, you can carry on with the lesson now.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much. So, guys, before we went away, we started looking at different types of unethical practices, and we got up to looking at unethical advertising. And I'm not going to spend too much more time on the rest of this. So, unethical business advertising would be deceptive promotion, deceptive pricing, deceptive packaging. Often you go to the shops and you buy a packet of chips, and it's like this big, and you open it up and there's that much. Okay, that would be deceptive because the packaging gives the impression that there is more. So let's look at solutions to unethical advertising. The first solution would be all adverts should be in line with the ASA code, and all advertising should be legal, decent, and honest, as well as truthful. So literally, advertising will also really come down to the company. You as a company need to make a choice on where you stand ethically, professionally, or ethically more in this case. And if you want to be seen and act as an ethical business, your advertising, everything you do, needs to be ethical. Now, the last ethical issue I'm quickly going to touch on would be abusing work time. Now, abusing work time would literally involve, I'm just going to quickly, I jumped ahead. So there's unauthorized use of funds. Unauthorized use of funds would be, an example would be having a company petrol card, and you're supposed to fill your card for business purposes, and you fill it up for personal use. That would be an issue. What would the solution be? A company would have to have tight cost controls, perhaps a meter showing the kilometers you've done, and then you can become more accountable for what you're using it. And the last one I have here is the one I wanted to get to. I jumped to abusing work time. Abusing work time literally comes down to during the hours of, so I work between, let's say, 8 o'clock and 5 o'clock. Between 8 o'clock and 5 o'clock, besides my lunch break, I'm working for that company. I'm being paid for the hours I am there. So abusing work time would be doing personal things during working hours. Now, example of abusing work time would be making personal phone calls, sending emails, personal emails. A big one, companies have stopped letting people go into Facebook because people would just spend hours on Facebook and not do their jobs. And what I want you to quickly have a look at, what are the solutions to people abusing work time? Solutions would be compile a workable business policy that prohibits the misuse of assets. In other words, give people guidelines about what is acceptable, what is not acceptable during working hours. Let me do one last one. Disciplinary rules against offenders. So if you've made it very clear that people aren't, let's give an example. So another way of abusing work time would be you get an hour lunch break, and every day you come back, let's say an hour, 15 minutes, hour, 10 minutes, maybe hour and a half late. You're literally stealing those, after the hour, you're stealing that time from work. Now, your company could put a policy in place saying if you're late more than 3 times, you're going to get a disciplinary in the sense of a verbal warning, for example, and you actually just get strict with your employees. Now, this was my whole big thing today on ethics and professionalism. I want to do an activity with you guys. If you have your Macmillan textbook with you, you can quickly whip it out, do this activity with me. So let's have a look. The activity that I'm doing, it's on page 137. It's activity 4. So let's change pens to make it a bit more lively. So on page 137, activity 4. This is a case study that looks at ethical and unprofessional issues. Now remember, what do I tell you every week? If there's a case study or anything to read, you always grab your highlighter. So I'm going to do this with you. Let's quickly read through it. So Jerkins Cheese Factory. Now Mr. Jerkins recently opened a cheese producing plant which has now become quite successful. Now consumers love his product as it tastes really good. It is low in, as it tastes really good, it is low in prices and has a long shelf life. So these are really all the positive things about Mr. Jerkins Cheese Factory. However, Jerkins is adding various colorings and preservatives to the cheese and is not declaring it on the label. Remember, according to South African legislation, you have to put everything under the ingredients when you produce a product, so that people with allergies or anything are aware of what they are consuming. So this is the first thing that he's doing that's not ethical. Let's carry on. He's been getting away with this as he bribes the health inspector not to report him to the authorities. He has another issue. He's bribing an authority Now, he can keep his prices low because his salesman, Benny, has a brother who works for the opposition, and he gives Benny inside information about various stores, what they order, their prices, and what they pay. So he has another ethical issue. He is literally getting information about competition. And then it would also cost him a lot of money to have the waste products from the factory taken away. So at night, he gets his driver to dump it on some vacant land near a small town. So he has another issue, guys. He's dumping on vacant land. Now, he also repackages stock of cheese that are past their sell-by date, and then sells them to unsuspecting stores. So that's another ethical issue. The food is literally has its sell-by date. He goes, oh, I want to sell this. I'm just going to put a new sticker on it. Now, the last part here, the conditions at the factory are poor and the workers are very dissatisfied. Some workers have been fired without the employee following labor laws, and they're also getting really sick of Jerkins losing his temper and shouting at them all the time. So as you can see, this guy is doing a lot of things wrong. And I'm sure as I was reading through it, you can see both the ethical and professional issues. Now, before I go to the first question, we've done the case study. I quickly just want to look at the picture that comes with this case study as well. Now, very quickly, let's have a look here. So this is Jerkins Cheese Factory. So let's have a look. I saw Mr. Jerkins giving money to the health inspector. That's not on. I can't work from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. anymore. That's a 12-hour shift, not necessarily correct if it doesn't have the correct, if he's not following the correct labor laws. There looks like there's some sexual harassment happening over here. This person looks really tired. There's clear hygiene issues there with that guy messing all over himself. We can see Jerkins here shouting at his employees, which isn't proper. And you can also see the place is pretty dirty. And it actually looks like this guy might be stealing. He has rubbish lying around. So literally, this cheese factory is a scary place in general. Let's have a look at the questions. So the first question looks at identify the unlawful, unprofessional, and unethical business practices in the picture and in the case study. So what I've done here is, as we went through the case study, we saw what we circled on the picture, what's happening there, but we also highlighted. So it's really easy to answer this question. So let's look at the first part, which is the unlawful practices. So for A, let's go. What are all the unlawful issues? I'm only going to do 2 with you guys today. If you can, try and do more by yourself. So what are the issues? What are the unlawful issues? Firstly, you are not allowed to dump on vacant land. So the first issue would be dumping. Another one would be that it's unsafe as well as a dirty work environment. Now, remember, if it's an unsafe or a dirty work environment, this could mean that the product gets contaminated, as well as workers getting sick. And again, I'm jumping back to labor relations. Remember, you, according to the law, have to make sure that your workers are healthy. So that's the first one, guys, unlawful activities. The second part of this question asked us to look at what are the unprofessional issues. So the unprofessional issues. Now, while I'm quickly writing this, try and think back what would be unprofessional. The first thing that I got here, unprofessional, remember, would be, well, I suppose just not being professional. So the first thing I thought of was the fact that Jerkins is taking as well as giving bribes. That's completely unprofessional because that will influence the business and it's against the law. So let's write that first one down. So the first unprofessional thing would be offering as well as providing bribes. The next one I picked up was that he's also allowing Benny, remember the guy whose brother works there, he's allowing Benny to gather information on his behalf. And that is obviously also not professional. And the last one they asked us to look at is looking at what are the unethical issues. So let's quickly do unethical. So what was unethical? And again, while I'm writing this, try and think of that picture, think of the case study. What do you remember was unethical? And what I picked up with unethical was that, so Jerkins received this unethical information from Benny, for example. So the fact that he received the information and he's acting on it is completely unethical. Unethical would also be the fact that he's dumping goods. Literally, there were so many things wrong there, guys. So let's just write 2 of them down and we can carry on. So unethical would have been acting on private information. And I said, you can also, that's a whole lot happening there. Let me quickly fix that. So acting on the information, but it would also be shouting at your employees in front of other employees. So shouting at employees. Now the reason why this is unethical, grade 12s, would be if you have an issue with me, if I'm doing something wrong, the professional thing would be call me into your office and tell me what I'm doing wrong. Again, I'm just going to use an example. Think about when somebody shouts at you in front of a whole crowd. It's not a very comfortable experience, and it's also not the right thing to do. So that's A. Let's quickly have a look at what B asked us. So B asked us, recommend solutions and improvements for Mr. Jerkins in line with good business practices. Now for B, it's actually quite easy. Before Mr. Jerkins can do anything, the first thing he needs to do, or the first thing he needs to implement, would literally be to follow South African laws, to follow labor legislation, laws on how to run factories, how clean things need to be, laws on not repackaging, stuff like that. So let's quickly answer B. So for B, what are the possible solutions? So like I said, the first important thing, he must follow all South African laws. And other suggestions that I threw in here as well would be he needs to make sure that he has a clean factory, and he should also make sure that he has proper waste management. Remember the proper waste management, he got the driver to simply dump the goods, which is, you can obviously all see what's wrong with that. So proper waste management. And let's quickly have a look at C. C is asking us, what do you think the salesman Benny should do about the ethical dilemma that he has regarding his brother? Now, for C, I'm not going to write this down, grade 12s. It's simply Benny should be spoken to you. He should be told why this is wrong, and he should be informed that he should stop doing what he's doing because he is providing competition with information. So that's literally the easy part with C. Benny should just be warned. Now let's have a look at D. What should Mr. Jerkins do about Benny? Now, theoretically, if Mr. Benny, Mr. Jerkins. Mr. Jerkins should warn, so in C we said that Benny should be warned. So Mr. Jerkins should warn Benny. Now, if Benny continues with this behavior where he's giving him information away, there should be what is called due process. Now, Benny should go through a disciplinary hearing, and at the end of it, because this theoretically becomes a legal issue, he can even be fired at the end because it's against the law. So that was a sort of a fun activity, looking at this really dodgy guy selling cheese and everything that he was doing wrong. Now remember, the big thing with business, we can look at what's going wrong, but we always need to find a solution. Now the next question I took was multiple choice questions from previous exam papers. And these questions, remember, multiple choice, grade 12s, I think a lot of people have a misunderstanding of multiple choice. It's sort of, I always joke and say it's multiple guess. Okay? Take the time. It's usually worth 2 marks. And at the end of the day, 2 marks could end up being a percentage. Yeah. So don't throw it away. So let's have a quick look at these questions. I'm going to change my color again. Let's make it orange. So the question was, which of the following would you regard, so let me underline with you, which of the following would you regard as an ethical business practice? Now remember what I've told you in the past, when you're going through these questions, go through in your mind, the first thing you should do is try and find the right answer. If you can't find the right answer, go through a process of elimination. So let's have a look at the first one. So the first one, so which one of the following would be regarded as ethical? So let's have a look at A. Price fixing between cell phone services and providers. That to me sounds pretty unethical. Let's have a look at B. Competitors working together to fix government tenders. The word fix is sort of giving it away. I think it's unethical. Let's have a look at C. Commercial banks fixing bank charges. Unethical. So before we actually even got to the answer, do you see how through the order of elimination we found the correct answer? So what is the right answer for this, grade 12s? So remember, what was the question? Which one of the following would you regard as an ethical business practice? And in this case, charging the same price for goods in urban and rural areas. So that was the first question. Now, let's go to question 2.2. And this one, let's try and do it slightly differently. Let's read the question and then try and find the answer before going through the deductions. So the monitoring of based business practice includes economical, environmental, and social issues. Now, this is largely due to, so the key words that are jumping out here, environmental, social, and economical. Immediately, I spoke about it earlier, those three things should tell you it should be part of the King's Code. So before you even look at the question, keep King's Code in mind and let's see if it's in the answers. So let's have a look. SWOT analysis doesn't really look like what I'm looking for. King's Code, this could be a possibility. General management, definitely not. And problem-solving techniques definitely have nothing to do with economics, environmental, or social. So for this question, we know the answer would be B. Nice and easy. Now, let's have a look at this one. Jumped around a bit, guys. So this part is literally just part of the don't stress. So an external factor that regulates the way in which businesses handle ethical challenges. So an external way that businesses can make sure what they're doing is correct. So external, in other words, it's an outside influence making sure the company is doing it correctly. So let's have a look. The first part here would be a company's mission statement. The second part here, government legislation. The third part here, safety and security legislation. And the last one here, company procedures. So I'm quickly going to ask what Tebogo thinks this is. So what is an external factor that will influence how business faces challenges?
Wow. I haven't been concentrating on it.
External, so it's outside.
Oh, okay. Government legislation.
There we go. Government, guys. Because remember, government influences from the outside in. Well done, Tebogo. Huh? So that would be B. I quickly want to do the rest of these with you. 2.4, which one of the following could be regarded as unprofessional, unethical? This would be, the answer would be B, guys. Selling second-hand goods for new goods. The last point there, you can check it out, guys. Thank you so much. I'm going to hand it over to Tebogo.
Thank you so much for the wonderful show. We really appreciate it. Thank you to Macmillan. We really appreciate your sponsorship for proudly sponsoring Mindset Learn Extra. Guys, thank you for tuning in and inviting Team Mindset into your homes. And don't forget, guys, homework is not there to punish you. It's there to enhance your academic achievement, right?
That's so true.
So do your homework, practice, study hard, and enjoy your studies. Thank you so much for tuning in, and good night.
The next part to business ethics would be corporate social responsibility. Now, corporate social responsibility, remember, would involve looking after the community, looking after animals, as well as just looking after the environment. So remember, CSI or CSR. The next part to this, issues regarding the rights and duties of a company and its shareholders. So remember, shareholders, we've looked at companies, things like that. So what is the business's responsibility or ethical behavior towards people who literally have a stake in the business? Another part would be issues concerning relations between different companies. So you could, for example, be two different companies selling the same product, let's say cell phone companies. So what are your ethics when you look at a company that is selling the same product? In other words, competition, for example. So are you going to, so an unethical thing, for example, would be to get somebody to get information from their company. So sort of like corporate espionage, things like that. That would obviously be a good example of not being ethical between two companies. Another part would be leadership issues, example, corporate governance. And the last one I have here, political contributions made by business enterprises. And this statement basically is just trying to get the message across. If your company is affiliated to politics in any way, how much money are you spending on it, and what political influences does it have? And that does become political, sorry, not a political, that becomes an ethical issue. And what I want to bring in with all of this together, there's a very fine line, like I said, between ethics and professionalism. And we're going to go into a little bit more detail now. So let's go to the next slide. So, like I said, what are we going to be looking at now? What is the relationship between ethics and professionalism? And before we can do that, really, let's quickly I want to give you guys a definition so that you know exactly what it means when I say ethics. So, ethics refers to a set of values that are morally acceptable in society, which defines right, good, and fair actions. So ethics literally looks at what is right and good, and also, which I didn't add in there, which is, so what is right and good, and whether you're actually going to act on it. So are you going to do the right thing?
Good evening, Mindsetters. Welcome to Mindset Learn Extra, where you learn more, learn extra. You're tuned in this hour with myself, Tebogo Precious, and the lovely Miss Tanya. How are you doing?
I'm fine, and you, Tebogo?
I'm fantastic. Now, we'll be handling business studies today. Would you kindly let us know what topic we'll be dealing with?
So today we're going to be looking at ethics and professionalism, and it's going to be a
Okay.
mixture. There's a very fine line, so it's going to be interesting going between the two of
Yeah,
them.
I can imagine ethics. And, you know, Mindsetters, don't forget, you know the drill by now, facebook.com/learn extra, Mindset Learn /live. That is where you post all your questions, all your queries, your comments, you interact with us. Tanya, I'm going to let you go prepare for a while,
Okay,
while I still remind them a little bit
What's-
about what they need to do.
awesome. Okay, see you guys now.
Okay, so you guys are pretty clued up on that. Facebook.com/learn extra, Mindset Learn /live is where you need to be at right now. Tanya, you ready?
Yes.
Cool. Take it away, please.
Awesome. So, grade 12s, like I said, today we're going to be looking at ethics and professionalism. Now, there's a very fine line between the two of them. And if you think back to all the life orientation you've done, you should have done some stuff on morals and values, things like that. And what we're going to be looking at today is specifically taking what ethics are, which is doing right and wrong, and we're looking at right and wrong, and applying it to business. Now, you can imagine issues like being moral and ethics and professionalism is very important in business, and it will affect their sustainability as well as just their general business practices. So let's have a look. The first thing we're going to do is look at what business ethics involves. So what does it mean to be ethical in the business sort of setting? So the first thing, would be, so it is fair practice with employees and customers. So what that means, not only are you supposed to be ethical with your employees, you need to be ethical with your customers. So if you are planning on selling them goods, and if it's second-hand goods, for example, you need to let them know that this is secondhand, because that's treating them in the correct manner. And your employees, that would be things like making sure that you pay them on time, that you pay them correct amount, minimum wage issues, things like that. So keep that in mind. So what we looked at now was ethics in general. What I want you to focus on, and this is very important obviously because we're doing business, what are business ethics? Now, business ethics refers to rules and principles which influence best business practice. So businesses develop their own code of ethics for best practice. Now, a lot of the time companies will have their own, and a lot of you this should ring a bell, would be a code of conduct. Now, a code of conduct and code of ethics will go together. Now, this would be important because, as we'll look at it a little bit later, you'll also see different professions have their own code of ethics. So doctors, for example, will have rules that they live by over and above the rules of the country, for example. Teachers have their own rules and regulations that they have to abide by, ethically, over and above laws. Now, the last part when we look at ethics would be that ethical conduct is a prerequisite for being called a professional. Now, so being ethical is a prerequisite for being professional. In other words, you cannot be professional if you're not ethic. So do you see how the link is starting to